Welcome back to Kufar Talk, Dimmies. I'm Tony.
And I'm Doug. Let's get right into it.
So, what are we talking about today, Doug?
So, Happy New Year, first of all, to all the kuffar out there. It's seeming like it's shaping up to be the year of the Kafir. We've got uprisings in Iran. Inshallah, the regime falls pretty soon. We've got Maduro got captured in Venezuela. So, great things happening for the kuffar all over for the world. Hopefully, nothing but the same for the rest of the year. And why is it relevant that to a kuffar audience that Maduro got captured in Venezuela? It's because the communists and the Muslims have a very strong alliance that goes all the way back to the early days of Marxism. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to discuss how this developed and why it exists in the first place, and why we need to build a kuffar slash freedom loving alliance against the Muslim and Communist alliance. So we'll get started talking about Venezuela. Hugo Chavez and later Maduro, they embraced socialism and Marxism, and they also got a lot of support from Cuba for implementing their socialist policies. And not everybody knows this, but I'm sure most Venezuelans do. Iran is also very heavily invested a in the communist regime there. And you would think on the surface, what do communists and Muslims have in common with each other?
Well, I would say that communists are very focused on an equal government, right? Where everyone's equal, unified, and homogenous. Everybody does the same thing. And in Islamic State, the Ummah, everyone also is homogenous, but they're homogenous in different ways, right? The communists are homogenous through income or property or capitalism, whereas the Islamists, as the news likes to call them, they're actually just Muslims. Um, the Ummah is what the Muslim agenda wants to propagate throughout the world. They want to expand and control the world under their own homogenous religion. This is very similar to how Marxism spread throughout Eastern Europe and modern day Russia, and how they created a revolution to homogenize their ideology throughout their regions of supremacy, right? They're natural allies because they're both, I guess, enemies of the similar ideas that oppose both, right? Nationalism is a strong contender against Islam. If you have any national identity that isn't the Ummah, which is the Muslim nation, it opposes their religion and it opposes their God. It's kind of like a middle finger to the Ummah. And in the same way, a Marxist society, they detest nationalism because it kind of pokes at the fallacy that the globalist agenda or the proletariat could produce enough for everyone, right? And it kind of pulls at generalizing a population and not necessarily allowing people to focus on what they're good at, right?
I
They're
agree.
both enemies of the Western world. What do you
Yeah,
think, Doug?
100%. I think you nailed it on the head. That's definitely nationalism is a big thing that they are both heavily against, which is why they're so like in sync in when it comes to hating Israel, because Israel is a very nationalistic country, and both Muslims and communists don't like nationalism. But there's another thing that they don't like, which is religion. And religion is also a very strong component of Israel, which you can see is why it's such a great uniting factor for Muslims and communists to agree upon, even though they have tons of differences, which we'll discuss in a moment. But communists obviously don't like religion, right? It's one of the core tenets. Um, and you might be thinking, wait, what do you mean that Muslims don't like religion? They're a religion themselves, but they don't like other religions, right? that's why we're kufar. We are disbelievers according to them, even if you follow a religion. And so Muslims basically hate all religions other than itself, and communists hate all religion in general. Some people would even go as far as to say that communism is a religion. So it's even more similar if you subscribe to that belief. But those are basically the two things that Islam and communism agree very much on, that nationalism is bad and that religion is bad, religion other than Islam or communism. Before we move on, we should discuss why this seems like such a weird pairing, the Muslims and the communists being allies. So, first of all a lot of the communists today are very liberal, right? They're pro like not having any rigid ideology, no traditions, just uh, individualism. And Muslims are very against that, right? So you have to follow the strict traditions of the Ummah of Muhammad.
Well, I mean, one of the major differences is that Islam, isn't against capitalism necessarily. I mean, look at their societies; they're very rich, right? They're very oil rich. They're capital intensive, but they do have this similarity that they don't charge interest to each other, right? In the sense that they prioritize their own, and the communists, while they do prioritize their own, a lot of the bureaucrats or the oligarchs get favoritism, right? So, like in a communist society, everyone flourishes who agrees with the tyrant, but the people below the tyrant's close circle, they fall victim to starvation, torture, suppression. I mean, just look at Venezuela and Maduro, right? Like, how many tortures did he, uh, you know, carry out against his peaceful protesters? And how many, I guess, months of starvation did the Venezuelan people go through where they had legitimate videos? You can go and search this up, videos of fake food on a Christmas table to almost portray that they had enough food to go around, but it's actually just it's mockery, right? So I guess the differences between communism and Islam can be summed up by, at least the Muslims have oil, at least they have food, at least they when they conquer, they take what was there and they sort of stabilize it, maybe. The communists just kind of starve everyone, but they both have this expanding factor, right? They both have this, here's our leader. For Islam it's Muhammad. For communism it's the dictator of the era, and we're going to go and take from others and bring to this regional leader, and it's an exhaustive, it's a resource exhaustive expression. So it's just expressed in different ways.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. The Muslims are definitely in favor of private property as long as the Muslims are the ones ruling. Communism is highly structured around um, the working class, the proletariat, having the power, right? And then it's basically collectivism, so you're supposed to distribute the power even though it gets concentrated at the top. And then Muslims are just outright with it. They say there's a successor to Muhammad who rules over the Muslims, and basically that's how communism ends up, even though the intention is supposed to be for the workers to have everything. So that's why you can see that on the surface it seems kind of weird that they'd be allies, but then in practice, when communism actually gets implemented, usually ends up like the ideal Islamic society. So let's uh let's move on towards our next topic, which is the Iranian Revolution. So this is the perhaps the greatest example of the Muslim Communist Alliance. In 1979 and the years leading up to it, basically the communists and the Muslims within Iran, they were against the monarchy for various reasons. The communists mainly because they wanted communism, right? They wanted socialism. The Muslims obviously because they wanted a Islamic theocracy, and they'll say that it was for corruption. It was because the Shah was corrupt, the king of Iran was corrupt. But obviously, if you're a communist, your goal is communism. If you're a Muslim, your goal is Islamic domination of the Kufar. And basically, they teamed up in 1979 to overthrow the Shah. And what ended up happening was the communists lost. They overthrew the Shah. They thought, okay, the communists thought the Muslims were the useful idiots. That basically, once the Shah is overthrown, they'll dismiss the Muslims and there'll be just a communist dictatorship. And then the Muslims thought the same thing, that once we overthrow the Shah, we'll get rid of the communists. And that's exactly what happened. The Muslims executed the communists, they outlawed the party, and yeah, here we are. Um, and the same story is repeating today.
I'm excited about the future of Iran.
Oh, me
I
too.
mean, given the Venezuelan overthrow of Maduro, I have hope that the world is watching, right? It's no question that the U.S. is a leader in democracy, in capitalism, and in free market. And so for the U.S. to go out and say we're not going to tolerate the drug trafficking, we're not going to tolerate the communism, we're not going to tolerate the lack of structure in elections. We're going to go in there and act. I think it's very inspiring for the communist and Muslim countries around the world, the people of those countries, to kind of rise up and to start to speak out against their governments and their systems. I
Yeah.
mean, Iran, correct me if I'm wrong, Doug, it used to be, a more westernized country
Oh,
before the,
100%. It was
right?
famous. Yeah, it was famous for being very westernized. That was one of the reasons the Muslims wanted to overthrow the Shah. They thought he was westernizing too much.
And I mean, did Iran flourish when it was westernized? Did it
Yeah,
fall? I mean,
it was great. I
I
mean,
think,
it's funny to say, but Iran used to be incredible allies with Israel, with America. It was, I mean, it's oil rich, you know. If you don't have like a theocracy squandering the resources, they're very oil rich. It's lots of natural resources, lots of potential for tourism. The nature is incredible, but you make an Islamic theocracy, nobody wants to go there. You get sanctions because they oppress their people, um, and they mismanage the water. Right now, they have drought issues, um, and it is very important to note that, uh, well, two things. Number one, they squander a lot of their money on trying to destroy Israel and America, like they always say, death to America, death to Israel. Um, and the second thing is that one way in which they do this, one way in which they waste their people's money, is by sending terrorists to Venezuela. There's a big Hezbollah presence in Venezuela, and uh, Iran sends Venezuela money and weapons. And by the way, Hezbollah is also dealing in the drug trade. So you can see this. These two countries are very heavily intertwined, and it's a great example of the Muslim Communist Alliance. Similar to Cuba, actually, there's people who have Arabic names in Cuba because the communists were inspired by the quote unquote Palestinian struggle against Western imperialism. That's another thing that unites them, right? There's this painting of the West as imperialists, and they basically, it's a enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing. That's the moral of the story of why they get along so well, even though they have different end goals, right? One is supposedly a workers' revolution. The other is Islamic domination of the Kufar. But you can see that Iran very heavily supported Venezuela, and yeah. So
just a comedic note right here. I
please,
thought it was funny how our friend Vladimir Putin, who isn't completely communist but is coming out of a communist era of his country, spoke, and China Xi Jinping, they spoke so confidently that they would protect Maduro under a U.S. invasion. And I mean, look at the state of things now, right? I mean, how did those promises come about? another thing I wanted to mention was, our left wing, the U.S. left wing, the Western left wing, has been very outspoken against the actions that the U.S. has taken in Venezuela. How the U.S. shouldn't interfere, and how the U.S. should keep to itself, and Venezuela is its own country, and we're going to oppress. I saw a clip
It's
yesterday
incredible. You know who
that
else opposes it?
who
Ham-
else?
Hamas, Iran,
Hamas, right? Yes.
all of the dictators in the world and the violent, oppressive terrorist regimes. They all oppose the U.S.'s actions. It's hilarious to me. Like basically anybody evil in the world, they oppose the action. Sorry to cut you off. Go on, Tony.
No, that's perfect. I saw a clip yesterday that summarized exactly what you just said. It was a guy in Venezuela, and the clip was in Spanish, but I'll translate. He was saying, "Why do you think China supported us? Why do you think Russia supported us? You think the U.S. is the only one that wants us for our oil?" He's like, At least when the U.S. comes, we have a say so. At least we can celebrate in the streets." And I thought that was a very, eye opening. It's a tragedy that it takes, outside force. It takes an invasion. It takes, a coup to actually relieve the pressure valve on some of these societies.
Yeah, 100%. It's very hard to do a organic uprising when there's like a elite regime that benefits from the oppression. It's the same thing in Iran, right? There's like maybe 20 to 30% of the country that supports the regime because they're a part of it and they benefit from the oppression of the rest of the country. Similar situation in Venezuela, where the people supporting Maduro, they're only supporting him because they benefit from his corruption, right? And that point you brought up was great. That like, okay, sure, maybe the U.S. does want Venezuela's oil, but you think the opposing forces don't? That's it's brilliant. But let's move on. So, how did this start? Like, what did it start with Iran? Did it start with Venezuela? Did it start with Cuba? The answer is it started from Karl Marx, the man himself who invented Marxism. He, in his writings, he was supportive of the Ottoman conquest of Russia under the Tsar because he hated the Tsarist Russia so much that he was like, yeah, you foreigners come conquer Russia because uh, any destruction of the system is worth it. Essentially, he basically viewed the Ottoman Muslims as the useful idiots, the same way how the communists in Iran viewed the Ayatollahs as useful idiots. And yeah, so this goes way back. I don't know, Tony, if you know more about the Russian history with the Ottomans. I know you know a decent bit about Russia.
Yeah, I think the important note, you already you said it, is this is not a foreign concept. Islam really isn't a religion. It's a political movement, right?
Hmm.
And this political movement has been going on since the 7th century. And Karl Marx knew that this was a political movement, and he himself, being a politician with a fancy new idea called communism, where the workers have rights and the people have power, saw Muhammad's message of giving men 72 virgins to fight ferociously in war, and thought to himself this would be a great conquering force against the Russian imperial empire, right? And so it only makes sense that this alliance between communists and Muslims or Islam is, it's historical. It's not a new thing. And I see in the future that the more constrained these two systems are, the less likely they are to turn on one another. So we have to be careful.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Usually, when they're weak, it's when they're the strongest allies of one another. It's only when they become strong that they really start to take each other out.
Yeah,
So we have to be careful.
yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that brings us to today. I think a great example of that is Zohran Mamdani. Typically, when the Muslims and the communists ally with one another, it's two separate entities agreeing to fight who they call quote unquote Western imperialists. But here you have a man who's literally both, right? He's a Muslim, he just got sworn in on the Quran in New York City, and he's a communist. And in the past, it's they were stronger, but now they're pretty much at their weakest point. Um, in terms of the grand scheme of things, right? Like obviously they're conquering Europe, but at the moment, like nobody's charging jizya because they're so eager to simp for the UN to not sanction them. But basically, historically, the Muslims have been like a dominating force with a caliph, with a leader who was declaring offensive jihad. But now, like ever since the Ottoman Empire fell apart, they've been fractured, they've been weak, and that's why you see them allying so closely now. Also, the communists are weak, right, after the fall of the Soviet Union. So it's a great point that whenever they're weak, they tend to unite stronger because who else are they gonna go to if they're united? They'll stand, divided they'll fall, as the saying goes. So yeah, but Zoran Mamdani, he seems to be the ultimate representative of this Muslim communist alliance. We'll see how it goes. For his first day in office, he thought it was more important to remove laws protecting Jews from discrimination than to do absolutely anything else. So yeah, communists hate Jews, Muslims hate Jews. It's pretty, yeah, like Jews are nationalist and religious, right? So it's it's not a surprise to anybody that's paying attention to history, to his rhetoric before getting elected. And I mean, honestly, I believe the US will probably wake up to the threat of Islam and communism before it's too late.
I like that you brought him up. He's a classic example of the alliance we were talking about. And it goes to show you that we're on an upward trend. It's typical for the Muslims and the communists to turn on each other when they're strong, when each of them are respectively strong. But when they're getting ready for a movement, like in Iran, how they did historically, they ally together, they divide and conquer the enemy, which is Western Imperial United States, Western Europe, the
AKA the
United Kingdom,
Kufar.
etc., aka the Kufar. And Mamdani is a symbol. He's not just a person, right? He's a symbol for the communists. Free healthcare, free rent inside New York, free. The man says free,
Free
right? And free
Palestine.
Palestine. Exactly. He wants free rent. He wants free Palestine. Everything is free. He's a total
Hey,
communist.
I'll take free Palestine if you're offering.
Yeah, I would too. And then you have he's an icon of Islam, right? Within weeks of his election, Times Square was shut down for the prayers, right?
Yep.
And so it's not a safe place for Christians. And if you think it's a safe place for Christians, just look at the UK, right? This is what New York has turned into. Um, and it's happened like right before our eyes in our lifetime. It's not like a Constantinople situation where, the Ottoman Empire happened so long ago we can't remember. This is a living icon, a living symbol of both communism and Islam, taking over the icon of America, which is New York, the Big Apple. And it's almost like you could see the Muslim crescent moon taking a bite out of the Big Apple, and we're falling asleep in some ways, but they're just getting started, right? Like we said, the alliance is strong right now. Maybe if they gain momentum and we start paying the jizya, Doug, then they'll start turning on each other. Who knows? Uh, but we do have to wake up. We do have to think about what's coming up next. If we have the mayor of New York right now, a communist, a Muslim, who does want to incorporate communist ideologies, probably using Muslim jizya to pay for it. I don't know.
Well, on that note, Alhamdulillah that you and I are committed to not paying the jizya, and hopefully all of the kuffar listening are equally as committed to not paying the jizya. But I want to add a let's finish on a strong note. I mean, like we discussed earlier, the reason their alliance is so strong is because they feel weak, because they know the kuffar are strong, right? And the non communists are strong, the capitalist Western imperialists, if you will, aka kuffar. Um, so it's a good sign that they're uniting. You know, it means that we're winning. And just take a look at Venezuela and Iran right now. Inshallah, by the next episode, maybe Ayatollah will be snatched up by Uncle Sam and his buddy Donnie. But yeah, I think it's shaping up to be the year of the Kafir. On that note, we'll see you guys in the next episode. Thank you for listening.
Happy New Year's, Kafir. Stay Islamophobic.
Bye bye.
I think the Kafirs are going to enjoy this one.